All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Allen Ulrich, here with Sean. Oh, Sean. Wow. Bob
Wow.
Rose. Bob Rose. That's what happens when you go on autopilot when you start talking.
Right.
How you doing tonight, Bob?
Oh, I'm good, Alan. I'm good. I hope you guys are doing well down there
No
too.
thunderstorms tonight.
Good.
Yeah, no thunderstorms, so we're doing a lot better than I did last week. I appreciate once again you giving me the opportunity to be on the show with you and Brendan over there at the Bayou Blitz. I had a lot of fun being on your show.
Yeah, of course. It was the least we could do, and it's been too long since the three of us have gotten together anyway, so it was an easy decision.
Absolutely. At least it was the NFL draft was the last time we had any kind of conversation on that show. So basically, we had somewhat of an exciting week this past week. We had the joint practices with the Chiefs, the Chargers. The Chargers game that may or may not was going to get played because they had a hurricane. Then they had, a 5.5 earthquake. The roof was leaking. I didn't know if there were any locusts, flies, frogs, or if the water turned blood red. I did not see Moses there. I don't think he follows the Saints anymore. But, it was just one of those things where I was like, good God, anything else could go wrong. Oh, and then Jimmy Graham has that incident with the police like the day before. So I don't know what else could have gone wrong that day, but they won the game. We saw some good things. We saw a lot of bad things. It was a kind of a strange game because we didn't even see the starters at all for either team, and I can kind of understand that because they really got the bulk of their work done in the practices they had beforehand. But the game was sort of anticlimactic to the whole week of everything that was going on. So how did you take this past week, this weekend?
Pretty much the same. And I think it was either on Friday or Saturday. I actually wrote an article saying, in my opinion, that the NFL should cancel that preseason game. And my reason, I had a handful of reasonings. And number one, the hurricane that was looming offshore, which at the time was a Category 3, Category 4 storm.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, that dissipated significantly by game time. But I don't have to tell you guys, and I've been in 5 of them myself. When you're dealing with a hurricane, it's a very unpredictable, fluid situation. And it's bad enough if you're down in the Gulf Coast and you have a hurricane looming offshore. But at least the emergency response teams are accustomed to dealing with that situation. One of my points was that in Southern California, Southern California was under their first tropical storm warning since 1939. Now, I know emergency response teams, they train for everything, but you also know for a fact that it's a far different animal when you're training for something as opposed to when you have to experience it in real life. So you were dealing with all those things, plus the earthquake, which as always, obviously cannot be predicted or dealt with or prepared for. Excuse me. And you're dealing with a preseason game, which means absolutely nothing in the win or loss column. With two teams that had already gotten the work that they wanted to get in for the week prior to that. So to me, it's still luckily, other than it just being a mess of a situation, everybody got in and out safely as far as teams, fans, media, etc. So in my opinion, a bullet was dodged, but this could have been an absolutely catastrophic situation for absolutely no reason whatsoever. So if the same thing happened a week from now, in preparation for the Texans game, I'd write the same article. I'd have the same opinion. This is a preseason game, folks. And then, like you said, you factor in, maybe Jimmy Graham got raptured. I don't know. But we don't know what's going on with his situation, and I took some heat for publishing the news story that, by the way, included not only the TMZ report of his arrest, but also the New Orleans Saints official statement on his medical situation. So we still don't know exactly what's going on with Jimmy Graham. He's going to get more medical tests and more evaluations this week now that they're home in New Orleans, and hopefully some things will be a little bit more clear. But the basic update on the Jimmy Graham situation is that he was found disoriented, and that he was taken into custody by authorities. You have to watch the wording of that, folks. And Alan, you know this. Taken into custody does not mean you were arrested. Certainly does not necessarily mean you were taken to jail. It means you were detained by authorities. And a very disoriented and agitated Graham reportedly resisted arrest. So we'll have to wait and see if he gets charged with that as well. But basically, after taking him into custody, they took him into the hospital where they kept him for observation, turned him over to the custody of New Orleans Saints team officials. So yeah, that's where we are in the Jimmy Graham situation. And we're 10 minutes into the show, and we have yet to talk about a snap of professional football.
Well, and it's funny because, and I'll talk about Jimmy Graham again in a second, but I can remember the weekend of Katrina. The Saints had a preseason game at home versus the Ravens, I believe, and I think I told this story on the air once already, but I was already aware that this storm was coming because I got about 10 o'clock that Friday. The place I was working at, one of my coworkers came upstairs where my office was and said, "Hey, do you see this?" And he pushes in front of me. Night, Will. He says, "Hey, do you see this?" And he pushes in front of me and he says, "This came from one of the offshore rigs weather forecasts, and it had the storm in the Gulf." And I said, no. In fact, I just got finished hearing the guy on the radio chewing out some representative from Shell in the morning about evacuating rigs. And he said, this thing's not even going across Florida. It's going to skirt the coast and turn back out to the Atlantic. You're panicking people needlessly. And he's like, well, we've got some forecasts that show it's coming this way. So I can't remember anymore if I went to that game or not. I keep thinking I didn't because I was worried about the storm, because we left that Sunday morning. But I do know that during the game, you can see people, back then the phones weren't as advanced. It was flip phones. There was no iPhone yet. And people started, getting texts, and you could see people calling on their phone and stuff, hearing about the storm now in the Gulf, and possibly the doomsday scenario for the city of New Orleans is that a hurricane comes up the mouth of the Mississippi River. That's what Hurricane Betsy did. And Katrina's initial forecast in the cone of uncertainty had it going up the mouth of the river, also had it turning towards the Gulf Coast, where it eventually did make landfall. But that cone of uncertainty was not like this. It was a tight window. So it was from the other side of the river to roughly Gulfport, that area where it actually made landfall. So people were pretty nervous about this. So, yeah, in a city like New Orleans, when you see a storm coming, everything gets shut down. They would have shut that game down. And I think people weren't. That's why I don't remember if I was at this game or not, because I don't think people even paid attention to what was the outcome of this game. The Saints went to Oakland early to get away from the city and away from the storm and do their practices out in Oakland. We all thought the same thing. I think they did, yes, because of the storm possibly coming. They took their families, but again, like most of us, they took about a week's worth of luggage, if that much, and stayed in Oakland for the weekend or in the Bay Area for the weekend. But yeah, all that stuff kind of disappeared where people didn't care about preseason and everything else like that, because once that storm hit, and of course the aftermath, yeah, it really puts things in perspective. So I can understand to an extent California just like, okay, whatever, we're going to play the game. But I know if this would have been New Orleans, people would have like, or Miami, Tampa, anybody who's, Jacksonville, anybody who's experienced hurricanes, we're like, nope, nope, we're cutting all this stuff out. We're not doing this. So it's, yeah, my dad said something about this, Chad. The Saints usually don't play all the preseason games on a Sunday. Usually there's a Thursday night one. There's most of them are played on Saturday. This is an unusual year because my dad even said this. The third preseason game, they usually try and have all the games finished by Saturday night.
Yeah. Because
Sunday was cut down day, and then everybody had a full week before the Thursday night kickoff game. So, this is unusual. 3 Sundays in a row. Last week was Sunday at noon, which was even stranger, for a preseason game. Usually they're all at night or in the afternoon, late in the afternoon. So, it's an unusual. It just feels weird. The whole thing feels weird.
Yeah.
And real quick on Jimmy Graham. I felt the same way. As soon as I heard this, I was like, there's something not right. And I did say the same thing you said. He wasn't arrested. They didn't book him. He didn't go to jail. There's no mug shot. They, like you said, they detained him also for his own safety. Because a guy is disoriented, walking out in traffic. You're going to detain him and get him hospitalized to find out what's wrong. And it was turned over to the team doctors right away. Now, you're right. He did get charged with resisting arrest, and these charges could be waived if it turns out that it's a medical issue. I said this off the air, but, my college roommate, his dad and he both are diabetic. His dad's blood sugar plummeted one time, and he got disoriented, and he was agitated and difficult to get under control. And so, it's not necessarily epilepsy. Sometimes it could be any kind of, illness, and you have this sort of reaction. So, yeah, it's not he's a pilot. It's not in his track record of being addicted to drugs. This is not, a Chuck Muncie situation, something like, or maybe a little more famous, Lawrence Taylor situation. This is something a little bit different. So, anyway, what was your feelings about the game itself?
I thought that it was a really solid effort. And complete team game by offense, defense, and special teams. And don't get me wrong, there were a handful of things that I didn't like at all, but most of them were errors or struggles by players or units containing players that won't be on the team 2 weeks from now. So I'm not overly concerned about that. Like you said, except for Trevor Penning, who I think played 3 series. And Jalen Smith, who I think played 3 series as well. The majority of these players were second and third stringers that even started the game. But even then, I thought both quarterbacks played very, very well. Even when protection waned in front of them, as the more backup offensive linemen came in. I know some people are saying Jameis Winston deserves to start over Derek Carr. Let's not go insane here. Other people are saying Jake Haener is so good that they should trade Jameis Winston and let Haener be the backup. Again, let's not go insane here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can point to at least a few things that I saw from each and every single unit in all 3 facets of the game. I was impressed.
I really couldn't take another year of Winston starting, honestly. I mean, because you saw, and it was, at this game, you saw the best and the worst of Winston at one time. An incredible pass that he threw to Miller, that led to a score. That was a great pass.
Yeah.
He threw a couple other passes that were really, really good in a triple coverage, but he threaded the needle. So this is what he can do. But then there were other times where he struggled to run the offense, held the ball too long. He just really look for the big play when something underneath was open. I get it. It's preseason. You want to do those things, but at the same time, you want to show more, being more in command. But overall, I was very pleased with the players I was watching and focused on. Penning was one. I said this in the Bayou Blitz, but Jalen Smith was somebody I wanted to watch, and Jalen Smith impressed the hell out of me.
Yeah.
That stick he made in the open field, honestly, if you couldn't tell the difference between 59 and 56, you would think they were the same guy out there. So I suddenly feel a lot better about the linebacker position if Jalen Smith can stay healthy.
Yeah.
But with, having DeMario, Werner, and Jalen Smith out there together, Zach Bond, he's very limited. He can't cover. He doesn't play the run that well, but he can blitz and he can rush the passer. Sewell, I think, is close to being ready to be somebody who can contribute. I think he's just going to have to be a special teams ace right now. So I feel as long as those guys aren't out there for any length of time, you've got 3 reliable linebackers right now. They just have to stay healthy. And
and I'll tell you,
injury.
I agree with that, and I'll tell you too. DeMarco Jackson, who I love anyway, Ty Summers, Ryan Connolly, they've all 3 had good moments, in both preseason games and throughout training camp. I do feel a lot better about this linebacking core from front to back. I feel a lot better with it now with Jalen Smith. Because like you said, Nephi Sewell, DeMarco Jackson, even Summers and Ryan Connolly, they can all bring some unique things to the table. You just feel better with a seasoned pro like Jalen Smith. It allows these younger guys to develop a little bit more slowly and not necessarily under fire, while they round out this linebacking core.
It's different. You see the difference between an undrafted free agent and a guy who was drafted very highly and it was a Pro Bowler. He's just bigger, faster, and he just knows and understands the game and reacts a lot quicker. And that's really the fundamental difference. So getting a guy like that this late in camp, really, is really a masterstroke. And the only reason why Jalen Smith is out there is because he has an injury history. He is not somebody you can rely on for 17 games as a starter. But the Saints don't need him for 17 games as a starter. They need him available for a handful of plays for 17 weeks, honestly. So I was really, really pleased with that. Now, another addition, Darnell Williams, I didn't see very much of him at all. I saw him a little bit on special teams. I thought he would return some kicks maybe. There's still a question mark for him. I think he needs to get some time out there. I think Miller kind of took over in this game just to show how healthy he was, and this was his opportunity to do something. I don't think Miller will play this week versus the Texans. He may, but I think this is going to be more of a Merriweather and Merritt and maybe Williams.
I agree with that. And that's if Merritt is even healthy. We didn't see Williams until really the second half. As far as offensive reps, because like you said, they wanted Kendre Miller to get some work, and he looked great. And Ellis Merriweather was basically the third down back through the first two quarters, and then split the reps with Darrell Williams in the second half. So I agree with you. There's really no reason to play Miller against the Texans. There's certainly no reason to play either Kamara or Jamal Williams. So this roster battle is going to come down to maybe this game. Against the Houston Texans between Merriweather and Williams, because I have a gut feeling they're not going to keep both into the regular season, even though Kamara is suspended. Because you have as long as Taysom Hill is healthy, he's going to get some backfield carries too. You've got to believe with the way Merriweather has played the last 2 weeks that that he has an edge over Darrell Williams, but they're going to give Williams his opportunities on Sunday, like you pointed out.
Absolutely. Any guys that you feel hurt their cause? Now, to be fair, Bryan Edwards got cut today.
Yep.
Not unexpected. He cost the Saints essentially 3 touchdowns. He twice offensive pass interference, although I thought the second one was really questionable. I really did. But and then I didn't see it until I saw Baldy's breakdowns. I thought that Haener really overthrew Edwards in that corner, because I was saying, oh man, Haener's got to learn to go more towards the pylon than where he was. But no, he dropped that in the bucket, and Edwards just didn't bring it in. I thought before today's news, I thought he kind of cost him a roster spot. But there's anybody that you thought really hurt their chances of making this team based on how they played on Sunday?
Aside from Edwards, like you said, and I wrote about this in my recap the day after. I didn't think Edwards would make it to the Texans game, and we were both right. But I did think that there was a few guys that hurt their individual causes. Next to Edwards at the top of my list was Lewis Kidd. And again, I can point to a lot of those offensive linemen. Max Garcia had a couple of costly penalties. Bear with me. I have the names written down. Soldevary, I thought, played solid. Kramer had a couple of costly penalties. But Lewis Kidd, we're talking about a guy who not only made the active roster last year, but saw significant action because of injuries. Now, a lot of those reps last year were at guard. The Saints decided to try Kidd out at tackle, in this year's training camp, and he played left tackle for almost all of his snaps, maybe all of his snaps against the Chargers. And man, he looked atrocious. If he wasn't getting penalties, he was getting beat on both shoulders, his inside shoulder and his outside shoulder. At left tackle, he could not get any traction for the running game. And the Saints came into this game. You could tell early on they wanted to run on that left side behind Soldevary and Penning. And they got some good looks. But once Penning had a seat, at left tackle, and they brought Kidd in, they tried to stick with that same strategy, and then those poor backs, they weren't getting anywhere. So Lewis Kidd, you look at the numbers game, I think Kidd might have been the 10th or 11th offensive lineman coming into Sunday's game. Now I think after Sunday against the Chargers, he probably played himself right out of a roster spot.
Absolutely. I thought Kroll had an opportunity to really step up, especially with the Jimmy Graham incident. I thought Kroll had the opportunity to come in and maybe make an argument that you don't need Jimmy Graham. We can come in, and I can come in, and I'm a younger player, more upside. I can make the move right here and be the third tight end. And I thought, he dropped way too many passes. That touchdown pass, Haener put it right where it needed to be. You had your hands on it. You're bringing it down, and you let that guy strip the ball from you. To me, I'm like, you drop that's going to cost you a roster spot.
Yeah.
Because you've got to make those plays. You've got to, if you want to be a tight end for the Saints, and we've talked about this in the offseason, the contested catches. You have to be able to show that you're stronger and you can make those contested catches. He didn't do it. So I'm sorry. I mean, it's cruel. You're busting your ass. I get it. But you're not making the catches they need you to make, so you're not going to make the team. So I thought really he hurt himself.
Yeah, that's it right there. And I know, some average fans, especially immediately after that game, were saying, you see the catches that Kroll did make, they got to find room for him on the roster. And yeah, he did make 2 very, very good catches, but he dropped 3 catchable balls. And I'm looking at a guy, and this is a guy that I watched very closely at Pitt coming out of the draft last year. He wound up being undrafted, but I watched him during the draft process. And I'll borrow a line from draft day, and I used it on him at the time. Looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. He's a very soft blocker, avoids contact as a receiver, rounds off his routes. I'm seeing those same kind of things. Now, when he has the ball in the open field, he's a good runner. And he can make the occasional highlight reel catch. But like you said, Alan, who cares about the the highlight reel catches are nice, but that Dan Arnold is a good comparison, Larry or Jerry. Probably a bigger, faster Dan Arnold.
I was thinking about that too. I was thinking the same thing.
But yeah, I mean, you need these players, especially if they're fighting to make a roster spot. You need them to make the routine plays for you, and that's what Kroll was unable to do.
Absolutely. I mean, and I was going to bring up Dan Arnold too. I mean, we talk about the 2018 playoff and NFC Championship game, and Dan Arnold dropping that touchdown pass and how huge that was. Why do you want to bring another guy like that on this team? Why do you want to have another guy drop a critical touchdown pass, say in a postseason game? Because I expect this team to go to the postseason. Mm-hmm. When Jimmy Graham got signed, I was saying, imagine Jimmy Graham on the 2018 team. Imagine Jimmy Graham instead of Jared Cook in 2020. I mean, you've got to hold on to these passes. You've got to make plays, especially when other teams are concentrating on your other weapons. I mean, we've talked about earlier this offseason, Olave. Olave is predicted to have a huge breakout year. So what's going to happen? Michael Thomas already has the attention. So they're going to double Michael Thomas. They're going to double Chris Olave. Well, you're running out of people to double. Mm-hmm. So this is when the tight end should shine. This is when Juwan Johnson's going to eat in the middle. Yeah, I know. Don't mention Jared Cook. Well, I mean, he is going to be my whipping boy for a while because he really pissed me off. I will forever blame him for, number one, ending Drew Brees' career, and number two, for letting Tom Brady get a damn championship. I would have, I couldn't live without the Saints winning another Super Bowl. I was not happy that Tom Brady was able to get one more without Bill Belichick, and one for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because I've already told one Buck fan, I said, yeah, congratulations, you got your Super Bowl ring because you hired a mercenary. Mm-hmm. And he used you like toilet paper to get his championship, so he could say he didn't need Bill Belichick, and so he can say he beat every team in the league.
Yep.
So enjoy it. You and the rest of the Bradyneers. Now it's irrelevant again.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you hear that Baker Mayfield has been named the starter now? With no big surprise, but
no.
No. I'm not surprised at all. I expected it. I just didn't. I actually like Kyle Trask coming out of the draft, but he's not going to succeed in that team. It's just not going to.
No.
That team. Go ahead.
I was going to say about Trask. I feel bad for him because I liked him coming out of Florida too. He had some nice tools, but he was never really given a chance. It hasn't been given a chance to succeed. at the NFL level, and at the NFL level for him every year has been with Tampa Bay. So I do feel a little bit bad for the kid.
And he's not with a system that's going to really develop him. I mean,
Right.
that offense was designed by Tom Brady, and it was designed to work for Tom Brady. It's not designed for a guy like Kyle Trask. They're not interested in developing Kyle Trask.
Yeah, not designed for a guy like Baker Mayfield either. You need a moving pocket and a running game with Baker Mayfield. This is going to get ugly in Tampa Bay really quick.
Well, and that's just it. You remember when Carolina had Baker, and I think they were like, he went 3 games without throwing a touchdown pass, or 2 games without throwing a touchdown pass, and just struggling to make completions, and they ended up releasing him by week 6, week 7.
Yep.
And he went to a system with McVay in Los Angeles that at least was quarterback friendly, and he had an offensive minded coach that was calling plays that went to his strengths. So he looked like a competent quarterback. But he's going to a team it's got a coach that's a dead man walking, a team that's going to go into full rebuild. They're not going to pay these guys anything. They're going to let all these other guys go. That Godwin's gone. Mike Evans may be gone in a couple of years. Devin White's coming gone. They're going to let that talent go in exchange for draft picks, because their goal is to rebuild around a new quarterback and a new team with a new head coach.
Yep.
They got their Super Bowl ring. That's all they wanted. Oh, he does he? Whatever. I if I ever saw that guy, I'd hand him something and say, don't drop this one. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's just that guy. I was not happy about the signing to begin with, but I accepted it because I'm like, well, at least he can catch.
Yeah.
But, he was aggravating me during the 2018 season. Him getting hurt against the 49ers really kind of hurt us in that game. I'm like, we're counting on you, and you got hurt in that game, and we lost that really by 1 score. But anyway. But going back to what we were talking about before, so, yeah, I thought the offensive line played badly. I thought the defensive line played extremely well against the Chargers. You saw a lot there, and hey, we had a Peyton Turner sighting. Peyton Turner created pressure like he's supposed to against backup guys. He forced a fumble against a backup quarterback, and Breesy recovered the fumble that led to the first score. First touchdown of the game. So, I mean, it was... The thing about Turner is this just... Are you Mr. August, or are you going to be able to bring this all year round?
Right, because Peyton Turner is quietly, him and Malcolm Roach both, but you expect bigger things from Turner because he's a number 1 draft choice. But both Roach and Turner have had really, really good camps. Turner just seems to be getting better and better every week. Now, like you said, let's keep in mind this was against second and third stringers, in the Chargers. But he looked powerful. He looked fast off of the snap. He was effective. He was creating disruption, both along the outside of the tackle and on inside stunts. So, just a really wide variety of disruption from Turner. So, something you got to love. But yeah, as I'm watching it and I'm taking notes, and I went back and watched it the next day, specifically looking at Turner among a couple other specific players. And first player I thought to myself was Marcus Davenport. Like, is this a guy that's just going to tease us with dominant flashes and then disappear for 5-6 games at a time? Either the invisible man on the field, or some kind of injury on the sideline. I think at this point of training camp, that has to be one of the biggest questions, surrounding the New Orleans Saints. Is this going to be the Peyton Turner that you get for the regular season? If so, you have to be thrilled to see what you're seeing.
Absolutely. I mean, and it hasn't been. I mean, granted, we're talking about against first, second and third teamers, but he did do this also against first teamers.
Yeah.
In the practices against the Chargers. Jeff Triplett's been talking a lot about not Jeff, Mike Triplett. Sorry, Jeff Triplett's the official. Mike Triplett has been talking a lot about Turner all off season and all during training camp. And he says, "Hey, I'm seeing something here. I'm seeing something." Nick Underhill and Brooke are just kind of like, yeah. But he is showing that progress, and the key is, does he get hurt again? Does he disappear when the lights come on for real? Does he carry this over? And that's going to be the interesting part of the storyline. He's not going to be a starter, but he needs to fight to be a starter. He needs to earn that starting job, and he needs to do it right now. He needs to get out there and push Granderson and push Passino, and see if he can get into that rotation. Now, on the other end of that spectrum, I'm reading the fans ripping them Foskey. That he's a wasted draft pick. He didn't do anything, and he did get his ass jumped by Dennis Allen on the field when he let that bootleg go through, because he didn't do anything. He didn't go in right, and then he gave up on the play and let I can't think of the guy. Stick. I can't think of his first name. But the quarterback for the Chargers just waltzed into the end zone untouched, and he could have made a tackle. So a lot of people going, look, he's a bust, and I'm reminding them right now that, remember Trey Hendrickson, that guy you keep whining about every time you look at the Chargers? It took him 4 years to get to that point. And you can say we developed him for the Chargers. The Bengals. But it took him, and he was the third round pick, but it took him 3 to 4 years to develop.
Yeah.
If Turner is about to turn that corner, it's taken him 3 years to develop. Cam Jordan, who is the greatest defensive end, I will say this, greatest defensive end in Saints history. He didn't do anything his first year. I can remember Bobby Hebert in 2013 saying, after Jordan had 8 sacks, Jordan's going to play the run, but he's not going to be a sack guy for you. We got to figure out where we get these sacks from, because he's not going to be a guy that's going to rush the passer. So defensive ends take time. So, I mean, your impressions of Mike Foskey, Isaiah Foskey. Here I'm seeing all kinds of names. I'm also looking at my son putting a comment up at the same time. Your impressions of Foskey.
Listen, I still like the kid. I liked him during the draft analysis process. I had him mocked to the Saints. Loved the pick when it happened. But like you said, Alan, this takes time. Peyton Turner is a great example. And Peyton was a guy that you and we drew a little bit of criticism because we highlighted him coming into the offseason as, hey, this is year 3 now. This is when the light should start to come on. It did for Ruiz, in his third year, et cetera. So let's not give up on PT yet. Now we're seeing hopefully that light come on. Foskey, obviously you want to see a guy develop faster than that. But as long as you do get good play from Turner, Granderson, Passino, then you can use Foskey in situational, as a situational player, be it against a run or a pass, which wherever he develops quicker. What I saw from him on Sunday, Isaiah Foskey, was a guy that he got off the ball a lot more decisive. He looked a lot more confident than what he did the previous week against the Chiefs. He created some pressure too, and he had he was in on some nice run stops. Was it perfect? By no means, no. Because you pointed out the one bootleg, he got beat on another bootleg. Where stick got outside the pocket. I think he threw the ball, instead of running that play. But that was another play where Foskey failed to keep containment. Those are the kind of things that you didn't necessarily have to do in college. You just turned your ears back and went to get the guy. Yeah, because and oftentimes you're playing like a read option hybrid in college anyway. So you're only told to do one of two things on every single play. NFL defensive ends, we know for a fact that that's a lot different. So he has a lot to take in a very short period of time. And yeah, you asshats that want to get rid of him or call him a bust, my God, you like Alan said, you'd have gotten rid of Cam Jordan after year one, or some of these other guys. You would have never given a guy like Demario Davis a chance. Uh, as a rookie linebacker, albeit not with the Saints, but still, you get my point. Just give Foskey some time. He's at a position where they're fairly deep, and you still have a Cam Jordan playing at a high level. And believe me, there's no better mentor in that locker room in the league at that position for an Isaiah Foskey than a Cam Jordan. So just as long as we see some sort of positive development from Foskey week in and week out, then I'll be content.
And that's the thing too, because people don't realize that the amount of thinking that's involved as a NFL player versus a college player, because the blocking schemes and the formations and things like that, they don't see that varied level of offensive ability like you do in college football. I mean, college football, it's basically one read and go. In fact, that's what quarterbacks do. That's why quarterbacks have such a big learning curve, because they're one read or two read, and that's all they do. So for a defensive player, it's like it's either going to be a run or a pass, and if I look at a little bit of film, I know they're probably going to run on this side, so I'm going to have to, play the run here. If they don't run on my side, I'm going to try and run it down from the backside. The blocking schemes are not that complicated, so it's more of a man-on-man kind of blocking scheme. So it's just right now, I think Foskey is thinking so much out there about, I've got to maintain my gaps, I got to maintain my discipline so I don't expose the defense, because the speed is so much greater compared to, especially the kind of teams that Notre Dame played. They play USC, but for the most part, Notre Dame's not playing. They're not playing the SEC. They're not playing Georgia. They're not playing Alabama. They're not playing LSU. I said that just for you, Calvin. They're not playing. They're not playing the Clemsons and that every week. So they're not used to the team speed of that level. They're playing a lot lower speed, a lot lower class of teams. And that doesn't mean he's not a good player, and it doesn't mean it's not a good program. It's just there's less for him to think about. And to quote Tom Cruise in Top Gun, if you think, you're dead.
Yeah.
You don't have time to think out of there. You've got to react. And that's what the film study does. Yeah, Junior Gillette was another one that, it took him a little while too, and he was an undrafted guy, so I was trying to stay away from the undrafted people. But, people forget Trey Hendrickson was a healthy scratch a lot of games and he was a third-round pick because he was a liability versus the run, because he was undersized and did not have the skills to rush the passer well. And people forget about that. They just think Sean Payton was stupid and didn't play him. I mean, I think about the guy Rob Nikovic too, who took time to develop. And he ended up blooming over there in New England under Bill Belichick. And once again, people are like, well, Sean Payton's stupid. And Sean's even said, that was my regret. I did not give this kid time to develop. I tried doing other things with him because he was an athlete, but he needed time to develop as a defensive end.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's my Foskey rant. So we've talked about the linebackers too. Let's talk about defensive backs a little bit. No Lattimore. Lattimore got injured, but it doesn't seem to be a serious injury. It seems to be only a bruised knee, a slight knee sprain, they said. He should be back. But We saw Taylor and we saw Debo out there and Roby out there, and then the defense was really shutting things down with those three out there. But then the backups came in. Anybody really stand out to you among those guys?
I mean, first of all, and he was in most of his reps were in with Roby, Debo, Taylor, the guys that started. But I think Hugo Amadi has played his way onto this team. At this point, it would be an absolute shock to me if Hugo didn't make the team. And I say that in such a surprise inflection because he was one of those guys that I just thought would be a special teams filler. He might have a slim outside chance of making the roster as a special teamer. No, this guy is playing important reps on defense, and he is showing me a decent cover ability in the slot, but a lot of range as a nickel safety. Undersized, yeah, but he attacks the run. You see him flying all over the field. I even saw a nice punt return from him, which kind of raised an eyebrow, towards those people that think the Saints are automatically going to keep 6 receivers. So yeah, in a positive way, I think Hugo Amadi has played his way onto this team. I'm a little bit disappointed by the play of Lonnie Johnson. I'm not ready to write him off of the roster yet, but I think he is on the bubble. And another bubble player, at least a lot of people thought so coming in, Isaac Yiadom. I know Isaac had an interception, but don't look at that through rose-colored glasses. He's had a lot of blown coverages. Not only in the game against the Chargers, but also in the 2 games of scrimmages. I think Isaac's going to have a real hard time making this team. Maybe in practice squad, but I think his chances of making the roster, especially with the way Howden and Hugo Amadi have played, I'd be shocked if Udom made the roster.
And my dad was really after that guy too. He didn't even know his name. He just kept calling him number 27. He was really aggravating me the whole night. He's like, I got my cuts in mine already. And that was one of them, because he was just really aggravated the way he was covering. And if he wasn't blowing coverage, he was getting caught holding, pass interference, that kind of stuff. And none of that's good for you. I mean, if you're trying to make this team, especially as an undrafted guy, those are mistakes you can't afford to make. And it's funny, we're going to talk in a minute about our final 53, and those 2 names you brought up, Lonnie Johnson and Hugo Amadi. I'm really torn on those 2. One of them's making this team. I'm not sure who. I don't know if they're going to keep 6 cornerbacks and 5 safeties. 4 safeties. Are they going to do 5 and 5? I don't know what they're going to do. I've got 10 DBs making this team. And those are the 2 spots I have. Lonnie Johnson made the interception to end the game, but that was really like a punt. Yeah. I mean, that was just a duck floating out there. But I'm leaning towards Amadi, but I just don't know if they're going to keep 6 cornerbacks or not. It's special teams, and you pointed out something I was going to mention, him returning kicks. I've been watching who's returning kicks.
Yep.
Lynn Bowden's been returning a lot of kicks. I don't have Lynn Bowden making the team, unfortunately, only because I don't know where he'll fit in, because I think it's 5 receivers who are going to make this team. And to me, the 5th receiver is A.T. Perry. He's earned a roster spot. So it's going to be between Traquan Smith, Lynn Bowden, Shaq Davis. I don't know about him. Only he has to make an impression this game. And it's not that he had a bad game or didn't make an impression last week.
All right.
I thought he did. But are you really going to lose him if you release him and put him in a practice squad and just stash him in there and pull him up when you need him? Yeah, I mean, you're not going to lose that guy. So you can afford to put him there. You can't afford to put try and put an A.T. Perry on there. Mm-hmm. So that's why I don't have him making the roster, just because I need to see more out of Davis. I need to see more out of Bowden as a receiver.
Yeah.
Because
And same with John Trey
it's
Kirtland, another guy I'm watching very closely on special teams and receiver too.
yeah. So let's do this real quick. Let's look at the our 53-man roster. The way I've got this kind of broken out is I did offense first. I got 25 players on offense, 25 players on defense, and the 3 specialists. We'll talk about. We didn't even talk about the kickers, but we can bring this up in the in this discussion. But obviously, I think you and I pretty much agree. The 3 quarterbacks are Carr, Winston, and Hayner.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So who do you have as your 4 or your running backs? I've got 4, and I've got an asterisk next to Kamara, obviously because he suspended 3 games. So somebody's going to get a spot that's going to end up being the guy they release when they activate Kamara.
Yeah, and that's just it, folks. Remember, for those first 3 games while Kamara is suspended, he won't count against the roster. The Saints are on paper going, and I'm like you. I have 4 running backs, not counting Kamara. And they are, and it's pretty easy for me at this point. Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller, Ellis Merriweather, and the fullback Adam Prentice. I love Darrell Williams. I'd love to see Kirk Merritt make a run. It just neither one of those guys have done anything close to Merriweather. I think Merriweather has a significant edge over them, and obviously Kendre and Jamal are they're set in stone.
Yeah. It's interesting because you've got Prentice listed as one of your running backs. I have him as listed the only fullback, so I have 5 backs because I've got Williams, I've got Miller, I have it's in pencil, but I've got I can't think of his first name now. The LSU kid, Darnell,
Darrell Williams, yeah,
Darrell Williams. I have him in pencil on the roster with Merriweather as the other back, only because I think if you look at what this team has done in every position where they needed depth, they brought in a veteran guy, a sure thing guy, rather than trust a undrafted or a rookie in that position. I think with Miller, they've got the one rookie they're going to trust in that position. I think that instead of going with a Tony Jones like they've done in the past, and I'm putting Merriweather kind of in that category, I've got Williams making the team, but probably getting released as soon as Kamara is active, only because they want somebody they know they can go to as a pass-catching threat. But he did not do anything really against the Chargers. If he doesn't do anything against the Texans this week, then he's not even making a team. So, and I've got Prentice as the one fullback. So, who do you have now as your receiver?
Before I mention my receivers, let me ask you a question. In your scenario, if you're making the roster decisions today, is Darrell Williams also your kick returner? Or at least factoring into that position?
Yes. I have him factoring in that position. Believe it or not, I got Taysom Hill returning kicks as well. And
that's a distinct possibility. Kickoffs, not punts. That's a distinct possibility. For receiver, and 3, really, in my opinion, 4 of them are an easy call. Olave, Thomas, Shaheed, obviously. I think A.T. Perry has played his way onto this team. The reason I kept 6, and again, I did this in pencil. I kept Lynn Bowden because I expect him to return kicks. But I'm looking at kick returner. I think it could be Taysom. Ellis Merriweather's gotten some looks. Bowden, John Trey Kirkland, and we already mentioned Hugo Amadi. In this scenario, I have the Saints keeping 6 receivers, with Bowden being the 6th, and I'm sorry to all Traquan Smith haters, myself included. I think if healthy, I think Traquan Smith is kept over Keith Kirkwood. And I hate myself for even saying it, but that's fact. Yeah. We know the Saints coaches, and we know how they feel about Traquan Smith. I looked at this through Saints coaches' eyes rather than my own.
I got Traquan Smith in there. I've got 5 receivers. The top 4 obviously are, Thomas, Olave, Shaheed, Perry, and then I've got Traquan Smith in there as the guy that's going to be inactive most weeks. And to me, his competition left the building today. His first was the Steelers receiver guy, the veteran there, and then Edwards didn't step up and take him out. So unless they make a trade for Renfro from the Raiders, or somebody lets a veteran receiver go who they feel is a better pass catcher and a blocker, I can't see them letting him go yet. Just, I know. I mean, and this is what I was saying about Davis. Keith Kirkwood's another one. You can stash them on the practice squad still and pull them up when you need them. And I know, he's hurt too. The only thing that's going to keep Traquan Smith off this roster is he gets put on injured reserve. Because of his groin injury. Other than that, I just, I know I don't like it either. I don't like it either. I really want him gone.
Alan and I both have the same thought process here. We're not looking at it through a fan's eyes, through your eyes. If I was looking at it through your eyes, Traquan Smith would have been gone 3 years ago. We're looking at it through the Saints. We know the way the Saints coaches think. And the Saints coaches have elected to keep Traquan Smith over receivers that, frankly, have outplayed him in training camp before. Has Kirkwood outplayed him? Yeah. Has Shaq outplayed him? Yeah. But they know what they have in Traquan Smith. And as Alan said, Keith Kirkwood, Shaq Davis, there are guys that you could subject to waivers and you could probably get back for the practice squad. And if you can't, they feel that you can go out and get a guy just like him.
Oh, Les Miller with his legendary mullet. 1992 right behind us there. Les Miller, and there was an offensive lineman. I can't think of his name. Both of them had legendary mullets. I mean, they were just awesome mullets. They had the curl, the whole bit.
Yep.
I'm going to talk about that in a minute, about possibly sending somebody to Denver, because Sean Payton is looking at this roster, waiting to see who gets released so he can scoop them up. And it's frustrating as anything. I'd love to get Torrance Small back. I mean, at his age, I think he could outplay Traquan Smith. But it's one of these things that you just feel like the only thing that's going to beat him out is a great veteran receiver who can block. I think A.T. Perry is going to beat him out for playing time. I think Traquan Smith will be inactive most of the time. Most of the games, he's going to be inactive. I think in the beginning, they're going to have Perry maybe inactive until they see how Perry looks out there against regular defensive backs, not guys who are going to be, working for UPS in a couple of weeks. But, if they feel that Perry has progressed enough, Traquan Smith's going to be inactive, and you're going to see A.T. Perry out there the whole time. And that's going to be your 4 receivers, plus Kamara, plus the tight ends. So, that I'm not worried about Traquan Smith playing. I just don't like that I have to use a roster spot for it.
Right.
So, okay, with that in mind then, your tight ends. Who do you have in as tight end?
Again, this is an easy one. They keep 4 tight ends in name only because Taysom Hill is going to be everywhere. But the 4 tight ends, Jawan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Taysom Hill, and the Jimmy Graham medical situation bears watching. But assuming it's, knock on wood, nothing serious, Jimmy Graham is on this roster too. Lucas Krull, J.P. Holtz, neither of them have done nearly enough to displace Jimmy from the roster. It's as simple as that.
Right, and I feel the same way. I mean, I think if Krull would have caught those 3 passes, then they got a good chance of pushing Graham off the roster, but he didn't. And you can stash him on the practice squad again and keep working with him and see what you got next year, see if he got better. But right now, I have the same thing with Taysom Hill really being your standard Swiss Army knife position player. He's going to play quarterback. He's going to play fullback, running back, kick returner, gunner, all those things. So now comes the interesting part. Offensive linemen. I kept 8. You probably have 9. I have 8 offensive linemen. Who do you have in as your 9?
Yes, you're right. I do keep 9. And honestly, I think Dennis Allen came into training camp with the idea that this team might keep 10. With the way that with the veterans that they signed, the Storm Nortons, Trey Turners, etc. The fact is, they might still keep, and I do believe that they'll ultimately keep 9, but they still might pull 3 guys, from other teams' cuts. The backups have been this bad. Six of them are easy. Trevor Penning, Andrus Peat, at least until he goes on IR. Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, Ryan Ramczyk, James Hurst. That's 6. It really 7's easy because Nick Saldiveri, they're going to keep him. The other 2 that I have are Calvin Throckmorton and Max Garcia. It's not because they earn the spots. It's just because they are the less bad of a very bad group. Is so far this preseason, but at least Throckmorton has started for you in the past, and Garcia has been a competent starter in this league. So based off of the roster that they have now, I think Throckmorton and Garcia are numbers 8 and 9.
That's interesting because I've got 8 because I was doing my math and I had to end up with 8. I've got, the same 5 you've got, but I got Hurst as a starter. So I got Penning, Hurst, McCoy, Ruiz, Ramczyk. I've got Pete as guard tackle. I got Garcia as center, and I got Salvaderi as your guard. So I've got that's my 8. Storm Norton, he did not really. I mean, the Charger fans laughed when we signed him.
Yeah,
he's just
and
not
I can see why.
Yeah, he's not stepping up. I think if they're going to bring another player, I think they look at, if they bring in 9 or 10 offensive linemen, you're looking at guys that they're going to be bringing in off other teams.
Yeah.
Because none of the other guys, I think, have earned a spot on this roster. You can stash a guy like Kidd or someone like that in the practice squad if you wanted to. But I have not been impressed with any of the backup offensive linemen. So, Salvaderi, he's a rookie. Obviously, they invested in him. Pete, you've got to keep him because you got a salary involved with him. And Garcia's a veteran. So, that's who I see making the team. So that's my 8. I can see him keeping 9, but that makes it harder because I've got 9 defensive linemen on this team. And a lot of it is because of the players that we talked about earlier. My 9 defensive linemen are, the starters, Jordan, Shepard, Saunders, and Granderson. And then I've got their backups, Passanio, Roach, Brzee, Turner. That's your 4 backups. Then I got Foskey in there because you're not letting Foskey go.
Right.
So there's your 9. Unless you're going to see a guy like Passanio let go, and I don't see them trusting Granderson to be out there for 17 weeks as a starter with only Turner and Foskey backing him up. I just don't see that.
Yeah, and that's the key. And I split mine up, in defensive end, defensive tackle, but I have the same number and I have the same guys, 9 and all the same names. Listen, it's tough to leave Nico Lalos off. He's had a good camp and certainly a great fourth quarter against the Chargers. It was tough to leave Jack Heflin off. He's played very well at defensive tackle. But you mentioned passing. We both mentioned Malcolm Roach early on. if a guy like Sean Payton or any other team that's a little bit thin at defensive end or defensive tackle, if they offer just the right package, for Tano Passanio or Malcolm Roach, maybe the Saints make that move, knowing that they could keep a Jack Heflin or a Nico Lalos on the active roster in their play. It's a drop-off in talent, but maybe they don't believe it's that significant. Unless something relatively surprising happens like that, defensive line's easy to pick here.
Yeah, and honestly, I think Malcolm Roach has had an outstanding camp and an outstanding preseason. I mean, he's making plays. He's not just out there. He's out there hustling and making plays. He did not play that well last year, and they debated long and hard about bringing him back, and they brought him back on a cheap deal.
Mm-hmm.
And he seems to be wanting to get paid. He seems to want to make the most of this. So I hope he doesn't end up being like Shy Tuttle and kind of once he gets paid or feel comfortable, kind of have that big drop off.
Yeah.
But there's Pig Goff. I miss Pig. I like Pig. But yeah, I just hope there's not that drop off. I hope he keeps his energy up all year because he's great as a rotational player. The longer he's out there, the more he gets exposed. But with Saunders and Brzee and just the rotation that they've got now, I like the middle of this defense.
Mm-hmm.
I like it a lot better than last year. So I think defensive line is going to be a strength. Now, Foskey, it's probably going to be a redshirt year for him. He'll probably be inactive most weeks, and you're going to hear more shit about this because he's going to be inactive. But it's a learning curve for him.
Mm-hmm.
And like Matt said earlier, if we have to rely on Foskey to make plays, and we're going through some dark times.
At least early in the season, yeah.
At this point, yeah. I think, Foskey is a guy who's going to have to get a lot of one-on-one work and maybe an off season of just learning before he's ready to go. Oh, well, Shy Tuttle is a Saints hero forever for that stiff arm.
Yes.
I mean, there are certain radio calls that will forever be in my mind. Hakeem drops a ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. Pigs have flown. Saints on the way to the Super Bowl. It's picked off. Tracy Porter, he's going all the way. And the German radio call of Shy Tuttle picking off and stiff arming Matt Ryan with the giggle in the background. Those are the greatest radio calls in Saints history. I'm sorry. I'm going to push down Tom Dempsey's 63-yard field goal in favor of Shy Tuttle. That's just how my mind's going to work from now on. So it's that great. And it was against the Falcons. That's the best part.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he's a Saints legend. Okay, so for linebacker, I've got 6. You probably have 5, right?
I have 6, and I have been back and forth. I have been back and forth on this. 3 are easy. DeMario, Pete Werner, Jalen Smith. The other 3 that I had, first of all, we mentioned Ryan Connolly earlier. Dennis Allen said today that Ryan Connolly has, and I quote, a significant knee injury. So look for him to go on injured reserve in the next couple of days. But the last 3 that I have here are DeMarco, Nephi Sewell, and Ty Summers. But Ty's played really good ball.
He has. He has.
I've cautioned you guys all off season about Zach Bond not making this roster, and I thought that at the very least he'd be on the roster bubble. I think he's played his way and slid right off of that bubble. I think Ty Summers beats him out.
Wow. Well, I don't have Summers on mine. I have the same 5 linebackers, except I have Bond making this team. But I would not be surprised to see him go, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Saints trade him to Denver. When we're talking about Denver guys, and trading people to Denver. Bond's somebody I got on that list because that's a Sean Payton pick. Mm-hmm. Sean Payton wanted him. You might get something. You might get an offensive lineman out of the out of the Broncos for this. I have not paid it close enough attention to the Broncos' depth, but I can see Peyton thinking I can get Bond and I'll make him a defensive end linebacker hybrid, and he'll rush the passer and do the things that I wanted him to do when we brought him in. He just didn't fit our defense, but it's a possibility. But yeah, Bond's the guy whose name I have in pencil. The news that Connolly injured his knee. Yeah, that, and I don't even recall that injury happening. But yeah, he'll probably get put on IR. I would not be surprised to see Ty Summers make it over Bond. Mm-hmm. I just have Bond in there for special teams, and because he can kind of rush the passer, and he's more of a draft pick veteran as opposed to undrafted.
Yeah, and I have Summers for the same reason. This is going to be one of those positions that's very fluid. Ty Summers, if he makes the team at all, might be one of those guys. He's active this week, and then on Monday he's cut, and on Tuesday he's re-signed to the practice squad. And on and on and on all year long. Saints always have one or two players per year. I can see Ty Summers being that type of guy.
Absolutely. But I think Sewell and Jackson both have played themselves onto this roster ahead of any of the other guys. And I think that once Jalen Smith came to this team, that pretty much cut Sewell and Jackson off of any shot of starting anywhere. Mm-hmm. Those are guys that are strictly special teamers that are going to come in maybe late in games that that are pretty much decided, or in case of injury. But I think they would go more with Davis Smith if Werner was hurt, or Smith and Werner if Davis is hurt, or something like that. I think that's pretty much how this is going to be set up. So I've got 5 cornerbacks. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest with you, like I said earlier, Amadi is a really tough cut for me. I don't have him making the team right now, but I can easily be talked into keeping him as opposed to Lonnie Johnson. I just went with Lonnie Johnson for the same reason I'm going with Williams as the running back. Just the theme of this team has been, we're bringing in veterans, sure thing guys. We're not bringing in projects to have any kind of impact. But Lonnie Johnson's clearly on the bubble. And if Amadi ends up being a good kick returner, then he gets it over, Johnson. The other 4 are obvious. Lattimore, Debo, Jackson, and Roby. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no getting around that. I've got 5 safeties. That's why I have 5 cornerbacks. But I could see 6 corners and 4 safeties. The key right now is we got the news today that Marcus May has changed his plea deal from not guilty to no contest, which means now his legal system his legal problems have played out. Mm-hmm. Now it's time that the league is going to look at it and issue their punishment. It's actually a pretty light sentence. It's just probation. He loses his license. It's a community service, but no jail time, nothing like that. And he had a pretty serious charge. I mean, fleeing the scene of an accident and he's drunk. I mean, that's jail time, and he avoided that. So my safeties are now in limbo. But go ahead with your corners first.
Hey, listen, I went in with the same mindset that you did. I mean, obviously, Marshawn, Alante, Adebo, Roby, no brainers. And you go Amadi, Jordan Howden, Lonnie Johnson. They're corner safety hybrids. I mentioned before, I think Amadi has played his way onto this team. If you want to list Amadi as a cornerback, then I have Amadi on there too.
Yeah. I mean, Amadi as a kick returner, that's tremendous. That's a big help. He's made plays in the secondary. He's undersized, but he makes plays. And he is. I'm paying attention to how much time they're out there too. He's out there a lot.
Yes.
Lonnie Johnson, I have to find him sometimes out there. I don't see him out there very much. Now, granted, not many veterans are out there. They're playing a lot of the guys they want to see and they want to get film on to make a decision.
Right, but
So
Lonnie Johnson was in
I
his
can't,
garbage time against the Chargers.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's the same with Smoke Monday when we get to the safeties.
Yeah.
Smoke Monday, he's a fringe player right now. He would really have to blow up out there against the Texans. I mean, getting turnovers, making a sack, that kind of stuff. I got Smoke Monday not making his team and being on the practice squad simply because of when he comes out. He comes out there at the end of games. He's not out there in the second quarter. He's not out there in the third quarter. And I'm watching for these guys, and those are the 2 quarters I pay attention to. Who goes out there first? Because they're the guys that the coaches want a lot of film on, and Amadi's out there a lot. Howden's out there a lot. Those, and even the guys that we're cutting, they're out there a lot. 27, the guy we just talked about a little bit ago, he's out there a lot. They want to see what they got with him. So, to me, that's what I'm paying attention to when I'm making these roster cuts. So my 5 safeties as a result are, one of them's a veteran they brought in. Once again, I've got Marcus May, Tyrann Mathieu, J.T. Gray, and Howden. But I've got Abram in there, but I have him listed as a fringe player. I don't see him out very much. I don't know what their plan is, but where do you go? I mean, I don't see Smoke Monday beating him out. So I don't know. I've got Abram in there right now, but I think if they see a safety they like that they've seen out there in another team, I would not be surprised to see that guy come in either.
Yeah. And listen, a couple of the safeties like you were easy for me. Matthew, May, Howden, J.T. Gray, and that doesn't have anything to do with defensively, but he's a fixture on special teams. But I went with 10 defensive backs and also 6 linebackers on the caveat that we know Marcus May is going to be suspended. Probably for 2 or 3 games. It might not be at the beginning of the year. So that's where my plan goes haywire. And as a result, I kept Lonnie Johnson over Smoke Monday and over Jonathan Abram. And like I said, as a result, went with 10 defensive backs and 6 linebackers, under the understanding mentality that May is going to be suspended. I think Lonnie, as I mentioned before, Lonnie, Howden, Amadi, they're those corner safety hybrids that Dennis Allen loves. You don't have that with Jonathan Abram. Matter of fact, you don't want Jonathan Abram in any type of coverage at all. He's a dollar store version of Malcolm Jenkins. Jonathan Abram is. And, even at that, I have seen very, very little impact from Abram, this preseason. I was rooting for Smoke Monday. I really was. But he hasn't done much. So to me, the final defensive back spot came down in my head to Lonnie Johnson or Jonathan Abram. As you mentioned, Alan, they've both been in the game late, which is not a good sign. But I think Lonnie just brings a lot more versatility to the secondary than what Abram is. Now, in my scenario, when Marcus May comes back, that's when you're going to see a Ty Summers maybe cut, or a Lonnie Johnson cut, or maybe a Hugo Amadi cut. But right now, I think they have that luxury of realizing that a Marcus May suspension is probably going to come relatively quickly.
Yeah. That'll be the interesting cuts to see. I'm really curious, and I think there's going to be a lot of movement on that bottom half of that roster, those depth players, where they're going to keep, who they're going to keep, and where. Amadi may be kept. They may keep Lonnie Johnson, like you said, as a corner, Amadi as a safety corner hybrid, and count him as a safety. But when Marcus May's suspension happens, that'll influence who they're going to bring in those positions. I think Howden moves into that spot personally.
Yeah.
But they're going to keep some, I can't see him going to J.T. Gray behind Howden. I think they're going to bring in somebody a veteran to back that up, a guy who's not really a good starter anymore, but somebody who can come in for a few snaps, So we'll see how that goes. Now, the kicker battles. I think you and I kind of went the same direction on this. Obviously, Wood is going to stay your long snapper, but I stuck with the veterans. I stuck with Gilligan. I stuck with Lutz as the kicker and the punter. Only because I like the kid, Group A. I just didn't see him. We're getting late. We're getting late in the show. All right, I didn't see him blow away Lutz in anything. I think Lutz really has got this locked up. They're going to go with the veteran. And once again, I think Sean Payton is watching this very carefully. What we do, he's taking the other kicker because he does not like having Mayer as his kicker over there. And the same with the punter. I just didn't see that punter booming punts like a Morstead to take Gilligan's job, but I think Gilligan is a weakness right now.
I haven't been impressed with either punter, but I think Gilligan has been slightly more consistent than Lou Hedley. Plus, what you have here. So I think Gilligan wins that job. At place kicker, a lot of the same reasons that you had. I think they stick with Will Lutz. You won a lot of games with Will Lutz. And you've also experienced life without Will Lutz back in 2021. Where kicking woes that included Brett Mayer, potentially cost you a playoff spot. So I think they go with the reliable experience and clutch, clutch range of Lutz. But I don't think Blake Grupe goes anywhere. I do think that they're probably talking with Sean Payton and maybe other teams because they're not stupid. They know that if they release either one of these guys, they'll never see them back for the practice squad. So they're probably engaging in talks with Denver and other teams for a possible trade. And if they get a package that they like, they'll swing a deal. If they don't, and here's my prediction, and we saw it happen with Blake Gilligan back in Thomas Morstead's contract year. In the next week or 10 days, Blake Grupe is going to come down with a sudden and relatively mysterious injury that he's going to be on injured reserve for the year. This is the final year of Will Lutz's deal. He'd count about $2.4 million against the salary cap. You let Lutz kick out the final year of his deal. You stash Grupe on injured reserve, and then you go with Blake as your kicker next year. That's my prediction.
I would not be surprised by that. I mean, we didn't get to talk about this last week, but I thought it was hilarious that Grupe got accosted by Superdome security. First off, what the hell are you doing on this field? And secondly, are you a fan? You're not a player. You're a fan because he is a little guy. Yeah. I found that hilarious, and I would not be surprised with that too. I think it's very likely they try and stash him because of the uncertainty of Lutz. Lutz renegotiated his deal, so they got some cap space. But I would not be surprised to see that happen. Last thoughts then about this weekend's game against the Texans. I think this is going to be primarily a Jake Haener game. I think you might see Winston in the first quarter, but they may start Jake Haener the whole game. I would like to see Jake Haener play the whole game, not because I don't like Winston, but I just feel like I'd like to see Jake Haener from start to finish play with some of these guys.
Yeah, I would too. And other than that, I wouldn't mind Trevor Penning getting another series or two. For extra reps. But outside of that, you're going to see, Alvin Kamara, Demario Davis, et cetera, et cetera. All those guys are going to be in street clothes. Another thing I'm going to be watching very, very closely, obviously the bubble players. We talked about Abram, Amadi, Lonnie Johnson, those guys. Zach Bond, are they going to step up and earn jobs? And who's going to be this team's kick returner? We saw Bowden get some reps. We saw Kirkland get some reps. And you could tell they're both inexperienced, but they showed me a little something. Uh, are one of those guys going to step forward and be a kick returner, for this team, so that way they don't have to use Rashid Shaheed, because we know they don't want to.
Right.
What's going to happen in that aspect? Because that's the way these guys can play their way onto a roster.
Absolutely. No, and the only downside to what happened in Los Angeles. I knew I'd say San Diego at least once. The only downside to what happened in Los Angeles with the starters not playing, we've only seen one series really with Derek Carr, and he's not going to play this weekend. So that means opening weekend, you're really going to see the first time the starters out there for any length of time. Everything I've been hearing in camp, the chemistry's been fine and things like that, but playing in a real game, it's a big concern. And we're already an hour and 25 minutes into it. Didn't even touch the Michael Thomas stuff that Jeff Duncan, put the turd in the punch bowl of Saints optimism about this. We'll probably talk more about this next week, but it really bugged me that Jeff Duncan felt the need to post a column like that, especially when people are feeling good and hearing all these great things about the offense, and Michael Thomas slowly coming back. And I think even Dennis Allen was a little aggravated with that, because he really went out of his way to say that Thomas is having a good camp, and that Thomas is coming along very, very well. So just your closing thoughts on that, and then we'll wrap it up for this evening.
Yeah, listen, I like Jeff Duncan. I have 2 of his 3 books. They were very well written. I read Jeff's columns. I've had Jeff on the show, but I couldn't disagree more with what he had to say about Michael Thomas. Frankly, it almost feels like a personal vendetta. And Michael Thomas has singled Jeff Duncan out in 2 different interviews that I know of and accosted him. So maybe there's something going on there. But to me, I don't know what player Jeff Duncan was watching at wide receiver, but it wasn't Michael Thomas.
Right.
Granted, at least at this stage, from what I've seen, he doesn't look like 2019 Michael Thomas, but he looked like the guy that we saw in the first 3 games last year, and that's still a productive wide receiver. He's getting off the line well. He's running his slants and sideline routes, folks, very decisively. He's catching the ball, making the contested catches. But he looks sharp. He looks like a guy that's ready to play. And he's gotten into it with the Saints defensive backs a couple of times. So he's continuing his physical level of play. I've said it before. I think we're going to see a Michael Thomas with a major chip on his shoulder this year, which is a good thing for the New Orleans Saints. So, again, I don't know what player Jeff Duncan thought he was watching, but it wasn't Michael Thomas.
Well, and again, it's just like we said when they signed Jimmy Graham. We don't need Jimmy Graham in his prime. We don't need 2019 Michael Thomas, because you have a Chris Olave on this team. You have an Alvin Kamara who's looked faster and better. You've got Jamal Williams. You've got a Kendre Miller. You've got other weapons on this team, Juwan Johnson, that you don't need to rely on Thomas to catch 7 to 10 balls a game and average 100 yards and things like that. If Thomas catches 4 passes, but 3 of them are first downs and 1's a touchdown, you know what? That's a good thing. That's a great thing. You won a ball game with that. It's like, I always equate this to getting sacks on first and second down, but giving up the third down conversion. What good is your sack on first or second down if you gave up a third down conversion?
Yep.
So to me, getting 8 or 9 receptions in the ball game, but you're not converting first downs or you're not scoring touchdowns, that's just stat padding. That's great for fantasy football. That's not good for real football. So
the Darren Sproles stat line, and folks, I know you love Sproles. I didn't. I saw too many stat lines from Darren Sproles: 8 catches for 11 yards and 7 rushes for 10 yards. We don't need that kind of thing. And again, I think we're going to see a very focused Michael Thomas this year. He's playing for money too. Don't forget that.
Absolutely, he's playing for money. He is playing to show that he is back, because he saw all the tweets. He's heard all the comments. He looks at that top 10 list of receivers and doesn't see him on that list. So that's, to me, that's great. And just like what I said with Michael Thomas, I'm saying this, Jimmy Graham. I want Graham to make this team. I want him to score a couple touchdowns against the Falcons and dunk on the goalpost. And I just want to see. I just want to see a couple of, red zone touchdowns out of Graham, and I'm happy. I don't need to have, over 100 catches and 1,000-yard receiving and 15 touchdowns. I don't need that level of Graham because we've got too many other weapons. In fact, I wouldn't care if outside of Kamara and Carr, all our other players are useless fantasy players because you never know who's going to get the ball this week. Fantasy football is kind of run people's idea of what's a good player, but I mean, to me, that's what needs to happen. So, Bob, thanks for sticking with me for an hour and a half. I know we covered a lot of stuff, but that's what happens when you miss a game, a week like this. And we broke through the whole 53-man roster, and that was important. So, who do you have coming up in the Bayou Blitz tomorrow night? Is it just going to be you and Brendan again?
It looks like it. Quinn, early, if you're listening, text me back. A little bit worried about you. I know you're working on a movie. Last time I actually did talk to you. So I reached out to Quinn to try to get him on. I wanted to get his thoughts about the receiving core. But unless he texts me back tomorrow morning or afternoon, it's just going to be Brendan and I, flying dual solo again. And we'll do the same thing. We'll talk about bubble players, any news that develops, and things like that. Just a lot like you and I do, just BS.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the final cut downs, I think, are Tuesday by 3 o'clock, maybe Monday by 3 o'clock after Sunday's game.
Tuesday, the 29th.
Tuesday, I was looking. I only had the date. I Couldn't remember what date was. How could I forget? That's Doomsday. That's Hurricane Day, August 29th. Yeah. So that's the important date to watch after this game, is to see who gets cut by other teams, who gets traded. And I think there will be a couple of trades right before the cut down, and I think that'll help shape the final 53. Then we have a week off because of Labor Day before the regular season starts. So there'll be football Sunday. You get a gap. You get to watch your college football, and then the regular season begins, and we'll start previewing that in a couple weeks. So anyway, thanks for sticking with us for so long. Thank you, Bob, for staying up till 10:30 at night. Oh, almost 11 o'clock at night. I apologize, Bob.
Even the dog's asleep.
I bet. Oh, so am I. So it's all right. But thank you all for sticking with us, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.